things off.
Cool.
And yeah, no, excited to kick off the AMA series with our second event under the Prepare for VC channel. So we're doing community-focused events within the Prepare for VC space. We have, if you're not on board already, definitely check out community.prepareforvc.com. And excited to chat with you today, Brian, and learn about what you're up to at Airblock, your exciting background here, and yeah, just talk about innovation and technology in this space. So yeah, really excited for this.
Yeah, thanks, Jason.
Yeah,
thanks, Steve, for having me on. This is exciting.
Yeah, and I mean, to kick things off here, love to have you tell us a little bit about what Airblocks is and what you're focused on. And we'll also keep this, we do some fireside chat and panel events, but these formats are more just conversational here. And if any, Steve, Nairobi, anybody else that jumps in, has questions they want to jump in with, yeah, we'll keep this pretty open conversation here as well.
Yeah, totally. Thanks, Jason. Yeah, I'd say really at a high level, what we are trying to do is basically future of work, digital transformation in action. So across aviation and aerospace, a lot of the maintenance companies, these are the companies that might be servicing a part of a plane or doing the full maintenance of a plane. Anything from working on a propeller to working on an engine, really to a wing, any sort of the plane. These are the companies that build the supply chain and the backbone of really how we get and how we travel, or how our cargo or our Amazon packages get to our doorstep, right? So those companies are super paper-based the farther down the supply chain you go. And there's actually around $6 billion in supply chain inefficiencies, penalties, delays, and fees. So our whole mission at Aeroblock is turning paper documents into actionable data. Really at a higher level, what does that mean? It's helping give companies technology that allows them to not have to be searching through boxes of paperwork, but to have everything fully digitized and everything traceable related to their, documents, contracts, technical records, what have you, really just their data at the end of the day that's on paper. And we want to help to accelerate a lot of those processes so we can stop the losses, companies can grow faster, and they don't have to be held back from a lot of just these day-to-day inefficiencies that, hurt the industry and these companies at the end of the day.
Oh, that's great. So obviously, this is a big problem across a lot of industries with outdated forms of, managing all the data and files behind it. So how did you figure out, I guess what led you into the airline and the aerospace section of this?
Great question. And it's funny that Steve is on the call because I actually found out about Airblock because of Steve connecting Janet and I. So Janet, who's our CEO and co-founder, our fearless CEO and co-founder, she comes from a very big background in the industry. She formerly General Electric Aviation, so GE. She also worked for Safran and also consulting to airlines. And she got to see this problem very closely and personally on really just a day-to-day work level. And I came into this industry really because she was looking for someone that was a little bit more technical, was looking for a software engineer. Steve was able to connect us, fortunately. So thank you, Steve, for that. And it's kind of been history since. I just joined as UI UX software engineer, and then became co-founder in the fall of last year. So I've kind of been in aviation and aerospace for a hot minute, but I do actually remember, like when I was little, I went down to Cape Canaveral at NASA. And I just have always loved aerospace and aviation and rockets and planes. So I've kind of personally been interested in the space, but never really in a work capacity. I was always interested in it, but I was just never given a work opportunity to be in the space. So it's kind of come full circle now. It's kind of exciting to be in this industry. But Janet's really been the spearhead of what we're trying to do because she knows directly how much these issues affect the supply chain of the companies. And I've been learning under her and with our team. So that's been really helpful and eye-opening for me to see, how I could use my tech skills and those types of insights into solving like really big sweeping industry-wide problems.
One thing I'll add, if I could just jump in here quickly, the reason why I ultimately decided to connect Brian with Janet is that Brian is very adaptable, and once he sinks his teeth into something, it's a really awesome thing to witness. So, just congratulations, Brian, on everything that you've been doing. I wanted to thank you for thanking me as we continue the conversation.
Oh, thanks, Steve. You're too kind.
No
Thanks.
worries, brother.
Yeah, no, I think that's really cool how you described it too. Of it's sort of like every kid gets excited about whatever the space, travel in space or just flying in general. And I mean, it's actually one topic we've talked about recently in one of our clubhouse rooms too was how it used to be everything or all space travel, and a lot of this was just public sector, NASA and government initiatives, and now everything's becoming privatized with like space tech and other startups navigating the space like Airlock. And so I guess, how have you seen some of the shift here and trends and what startups are working on, and where businesses are focused on in this space?
Yeah, I definitely agree to your point about it really being at the highest level. So like the really big enterprise players, of course, they, have the bandwidth to take on really expensive high level technology. And kind of like that's awesome because you'll have like the leading tech companies building amazing tools, amazing features, things with AI, data distribution, really high level tech. And, that's awesome. But then it leaves a huge sector of major industries kind of like underappreciated, kind of like feel like they're maybe left alone, not really having access to that type of high level tech. So I really see the opportunity, but also the strategic need for companies like Aeroblock to fill in that gap of companies that, are, definitely not like a public sector type, like really huge enterprise player, but are the backbone of major industries. So that's what I get excited about because I think that's where startup and innovation really come into play here. And that's really where like that nexus comes where, you can have people that are really passionate about an idea, use technology and then solve that and then deliver a sweeping problem or a solution to a sweeping problem. So I see kind of the onus is on innovation and on startups to, again, fill in that gap when and where needed. And technology is so accessible now that it's kind of like there's no excuse to not be solving and working on problems. It's kind of like something that we've had a lot of discussions with companies. I'd say in the last month specifically was kind of like this acceptance of like, oh, it's just business as usual. And I feel like, I don't know, this is like 2021, like we should be able to like not have problems, just continue to be problems because they've always been problems, right? We should always be finding new ways to solve challenges. And I don't think anything is too challenging or too daunting to attempt. Maybe just you have to realign your expectations of like growth and where you want to take this. But I kind of just like don't agree with the whole like, oh, like this is just business as usual. These are just how things always are. I just kind of think like with the status quo, like we should always be finding new ways, new innovative ways to do things better and more efficiently and safer and cheaper and more practically.
Right. No, I like that way of thinking. And I guess, as the CTO here, I'm sure there's a lot of features and functionality, a bunch of different ideas you're working on implementing. So how do you go about figuring out, what to work on first or what needs to be a priority?
It definitely, this is a great question because my mindset on this has actually changed quite a lot over the past, I'd say like 6 months or so. I think in the beginning I was like, oh, okay, like we know the problem, we've seen it firsthand. We're gonna go and build these solutions and these features. And I remember when I was working on like the original like MVP kind of like wireframing of Airblock, like kind of a year ago, because I started Aeroblock a year ago. So, or I started like at Aeroblock a year ago. So, like the MVP and like kind of the initial vision of like what I was thinking is like very, very, very different than what it looks like now. And I think that that's good, right? Like if it was the same, it would be like we weren't taking enough feedback, we weren't having enough conversations, we don't really know the solution. Because it's like you should always like there's always like this phrase of like if your app looks the same as it did like a month ago or whatever, then you're not innovating enough or you're not adding enough stuff to it. So
Right.
I kind of say like it's changed quite a lot. And what we've been using to fuel kind of the development in the last 6 months, I'd say, is a lot of customer focused conversation. So going to companies and saying like we know this is an issue, we've researched this, we know the pain that you're experiencing, you know, what would you like to see from this type of solution? What are the types of features that are most applicable to your use case? And those conversations have been very fruitful because it's taking it from like our ideas and our vision into like this is what an actual company says is a problem and this is what they want. So it's kind of like the chef kind of makes food, right? But it's really geared towards the people that are going to be eating it, right? Like if the chef is just making peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and people don't want that, then it's kind of like, oh, you could have all these PB&Js, but like who's going to eat that, right? So you sort of have to be fueling, and sometimes it's also educating. So sometimes a customer might know that there's a problem, but they don't necessarily know the solution. So that's where like our team and I can come in and say like, okay, well, we've talked to a lot of companies like you. Here's the key features. Here's what they have said. Do any of these align with what you want? And that whole conversation cycle is fueling a lot of the build that we're working on right now. So you sort of get like the basic functionality, but talking to companies and really understanding their pain points and having them articulate that to you is really helpful from a development perspective because otherwise like you could just be building and building and it's not geared towards anything actionable. Like you might think that it is, but until you have that actual like the notes or an email or like something written in your notebook, it's kind of hard to understand the direction. So that's where
Right.
the industry kind of has to tell you what you need to do and then you build around that.
Oh, yeah, that's a great response. And no, I like how you said it, you know, it developed and changed along the way. And yeah, you know, how you hone this down to where you guys are today. Yeah, Steve, I saw you had a good question in the chat if you want to jump in and ask here as well.
Sure, absolutely. Thanks, Jason. So, Brian, as you know, I follow you all over social because I love what you're doing from a self-development point of view too, and from a learning perspective. You know, we're both technologists, we both love tech, but we also love to, you know, showcase in public like all of our efforts. So I wanted to ask, like, you know, what has that side of the journey been like sharing with the public all the things you're learning about, like, you know, whether it be programming, whether it be motivational stuff, like what does that side of the journey look like?
Yeah, this is like my favorite question because it's again like my thought on this has changed really in the past year and I kind of felt like when you start a startup, I feel like there's kind of this hidden expectation that you should just know the answer and you should just like know everything that you're going to do. And like while yes, like you should always be informed of what you're doing, there is a lot of learning and growth that has to happen. And I really like social media because it allows you to have that level of transparency and to really show the things that you're learning, the things that you're working on, right? Like I kind of like a lot of people that I've been talking to about like Instagram, I really use Instagram like a blog. And I use that because you can actually write like way more in an Instagram post that you can on a LinkedIn, which is kind of interesting. And of course, more than a tweet. So I end up writing quite a lot in Instagram captions. And I've kind of been using the past few months to document what I've been learning and what I've been building. I think, you know, there's just, I don't know, I feel like there's a lot of posturing in technology and, you know, for good reason, right? Like these are important skills to have, but like no one knows everything. And I like being able to use social media to document a lot of the stuff that that I've been learning and I've been building with. So yeah, so I like documenting that journey. And I think it also shows transparency because like also real talk, like I know that investors will like look me up on Instagram, like especially if someone likes a post of yours from like several months ago, chances are they're checking out your Instagram. So it's kind of like when they go to my social media, I want them to see that, you know, I might not know all the answers, but I'm certainly going to put in the work to figure it out. And I think that that's kind of the hustle and the gumption or, you know, the chutzpah or whatever you call it. Like there's different words for this, but I think it's sort of, you just have to show that you are putting in your best effort, that you're, you know, you're grinding and that you're working and you're not just kind of, oh, I'll figure it out. Oh, I'll bring on a team member and they'll solve it, right? Like I think I've seen a lot of teams where like especially if you're a tech company, you have to know the tech. And even if you don't know everything right now, you have to be like working towards solving it. So that might be doing a boot camp, that might be doing a nano degree. I'm doing a couple right now on cloud and DevOps, and some on decentralization, but you kind of always have to be learning. And I think as tech people, a lot of people don't talk about that. They don't talk about the courses that they're taking because they want to, appear as the expert all the time. And no one is the expert. I was talking to a CTO the other day, literally yesterday afternoon, and we were talking about imposter syndrome. And I was like, "Oh, like you experience imposter syndrome because this person is like they have like a family, and they're like much 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 older than me." And I was saying like, "Really, like you have imposter syndrome?" And he goes, "Yeah, like definitely do. Like everyone does. I mean, it's different scales of imposter syndrome, but." I think we all kind of experience the same things, even with sales, right? Even with marketing, even with business intelligence or investor relations. We all kind of like struggle or work on the same things. So being able to kind of document that journey, I think shows people that you care and you're serious. And even if this is like helpful for any other startups out there, I feel like for investors, like I'm just telling you, like investors do look me up on social media, and I want them to see that I'm one of those people that's going to be up at 10, 11, midnight, or up at 5 or 6 or 7 in the morning to make it happen. So that's kind of where like I really love social media for being able to show that real-time growth. And even if you look at my social media from like the way beginning, like my workspace has changed, Aeroblock has changed. There's been so much change. So being able to see that physically on social media, I think is a huge plus to entrepreneurs that want to show that they're making traction and they're making gains, not just talk, right? Actually show. And I think we're in like that. Gary Vee talks about this. Gary Vaynerchuk from VaynerMedia, but he talks about that of like we're in the show me economy. Like people don't want to hear, they want to see. So social media allows us to document a lot of those stories and the growth.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I'll get off my soapbox, but that's I'm very passionate about this because I think so many people that I talk to that are developers, they think like, oh, I have to position myself as like the expert all the time. And I feel like talking to like more senior type people, they think the opposite. They think that if you can show what you're learning and what you're building over time, that's more convincing than just appearing as the expert all the time. Because no one knows everything, right? We're all learning, we're all growing together.
Yeah, that proof of work is a powerful thing. And one thing I'll add is that what I appreciate, having witnessed this shift too in the ecosystem and the, tech startup ecosystem is, people are being a lot more radically honest and also radically accepting, not only of their limitations, but like once you, to your point, Brian, once you come to that place where you're like, okay, I don't know this thing, there's so much freedom in that because it frees you up to then learn and grow. And growth can be painful, but it's necessary in order for us to advance, whether in our startups or in life in general. So yeah, thanks for sharing that.
And just on the learning side, I think that was great advice. And so what are you focused more on at this stage? Are you more interested in learning and honing on the technical and development side or the entrepreneurship side, or mix of both? What's been most effective for you?
Yeah, I'd say I think let me think about this because this is a good question. I'd say I kind of take like the college approach, and this is not something that I was doing before, but in the same way that, okay, like when you're in school, like high school, college, like graduate school, what have you, right? You're even middle school, you're taking multiple classes all the time. So you might be taking an English class, you might be taking a math class, maybe science, maybe arts, literature, all these different types of topics. I kind of at this point think that you have to be learning multiple things. And if you double down on only one thing, it will make you very skilled, but kind of like a fine chisel. I don't know what the name of it is, but like fine tooth chisel, is that what it's called? Or like a fine tip Sharpie versus being able to have broad strokes that you can do across multiple regions. So I didn't have like a sales background. Like I didn't have I had a marketing and public relations background. So I'm really good at like hype and like brand awareness and building, campaigns and that type of stuff. But sales is something that I did not have experience in. And I had to spend time like actually taking courses, which is kind of like, I don't know if anyone's like in sales, they're like, classes for sales. Like sometimes these things like don't come easy to people. So learning about like price rejection, or like you do like sales calls, and then you have to be like, oh, like how do you like negotiate, or those types of skills. Those are things that like don't come easy. In the same way with tech, no one just comes out knowing Java. Like if they do, let me know, because I'd love to talk to them. But like no one just automatically knows things. So for me, I had to really double down on, of course, the tech, but also the sales and the outreach, and a little bit too on the investor relations. I've learned quite a lot about, pitch decks and even pitching and presenting. This is something that kind of is an overlooked topic to me of presenting technology. And Steve, I know you've been following Airblock for quite a while, so you've sort of seen the Aeroblock pitch very different than what it looked like 8 months ago.
For
And
sure.
that's been fueled by a lot of conversations, but I'd say a lot of coursework. I did take Arline Hamilton's. She has this whole like teachable ecosystem of courses, and that was really helpful to me as an entrepreneur, because it's kind of, you don't know what you don't know. But if people are making coursework and workshops and worksheets and books that can help you kind of learn about a term sheet, learn about cap tables, learn about all these high level business things that we might not learn about, those are really valuable and really helpful. So I'd say like I'm always building, but in a certain sense, like I've had to really double down on sales, marketing, and outreach, because it's you can, and I actually do believe this pretty strongly. It's like you could build the most amazing technology in the world, you could build the most incredible internet, but if no one knows that it exists, if no one sees you, if no one has a personal relationship with you to be like kind of at the point where it's like, I don't even care what you built, whatever you made, I'm buying it. To build that sort of brand loyalty and brand reputation for a company, if you don't have those things, it's going to be really hard to sell an amazing product. So that's where I think our team and I are really like trying to get out into the community to have a lot of conversations, and that's actually fueling the pitch. It's fueling the product. It's fueling a lot of company industry conversations that are really beneficial and helpful to us. So I think you sort of have to be learning, and like learning what you don't know, but also learning in public. And I think that that's totally fair game for anyone that's trying to build something.
And I think you have the perfect, picture in the background there with the success on the top and everything else that goes underneath it.
Thanks. Yeah, I know. I was like kind of during COVID, I was kind of remodeling my my like work home office, and that was kind of where like I have like this poster here, and then I have another one that's like the success nutrition facts, and I love being able to see kind of both, because it keeps you kind of honest. I think that there's a lot of articles out there of like, startup team raises $6 million overnight, and it's this hype culture that's just like not very true and not very honest and realistic. And I feel like it's like even just to kind of take like a personal example, right? So we had an amazing opportunity to be in NASA's iTech program, huge, like learning, growth, validation, amazing program, amazing like insights and connections and everything. But like we of course like got into that program, but that's after like 10, 11 months of working on something really hard, right? Like you of course have like these successes and these wins, but even just with the poster, right? There's so many layers that you don't see. Like you don't see me up until like 1, 2 a.m. Week after week, month after month, right? You don't see that unless you necessarily document that. And I don't even document all that stuff necessarily, but it's like there's a lot of things to startups that you don't see. And I think something that we as founders, if someone else isn't going to appreciate this, we as a team have to appreciate it, like all of the grind and the hustle and the hard work, because for that minute of fame or that article and that feature, how many hours were put into getting there. And I think that's something that, of course there are like overnight successes in a sense, but are they really overnight successes? Or and there's like these quotes I see on Twitter all the time, but it's like 20 years to become an overnight success, or like 10 years
Right.
to become
Yeah, I've seen this.
you know
Yeah.
what I mean, Jason? Like that's kind of where it's like you don't know how much someone has been grinding to get to that point. And I feel like we as founders, and you guys do a lot of this, which is awesome. It's celebrating wins of startups. And I think there's so much of this like, well, do you have 10K ARR? Like, do you have $10,000 that you're making per month? And I think it's like, celebrate the wins, because to get to those big milestones, or $100 million ARR or what have you, right? Like, to get to that, there's so many mini wins that you have to make along the way. But I don't think that we should call them mini wins. I think that every win in a startup is a win. First client, first customer, first sale, like first onboarded team member, right? All of these milestones are big, and they might not seem really big to, I don't know, like venture or like IPO type companies where they're like, oh yeah, like we made, $10 million last month. Okay, but like, how long did it take you to get there? And that's where we as founders have to root ourselves on sometimes, if there aren't other people to root us on. As someone actually tell me about this, and they're like, Brian, why did you like your own post? And I kind of got into a joke, and I was like, well, you should always be your biggest fan. Like, you should always celebrate and support what you work on. So that's why I always like the Airblock posts, even though I might be the one that's writing it, because I'm excited. I'm happy about what I'm building and what I'm working on. So I always think you should always be your biggest fan and your biggest cheerleader, especially when the team might be really small or the community might be really small. You got to always be your biggest fan.
No, I do the exact same thing with Prepare for VC. And I think to your point, Brian, it's like what you said was so powerful for me. Every win for a startup, no matter what it might look like to the outside world, to different sets of eyeballs, it's a win. It's a qualitative win because of all of the hard work that goes into it, all of the effort that goes into it. And I think the more we encourage this kind of a mindset for founders and less of the high level hype, less of the, I would say at times, unhealthy emphasis on things like, just keep scrolling, keep looking at that sort of stuff. No, I think founders need to look within and realize that they have, unlimited potential, and everything will be all right in the end as long as we believe in ourselves as a community.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, and even I've heard some of the overnight successes talk at conferences, and I mean, it's not. There is a lot of they were still early stage startups at one point too, and spending those like sleepless nights working on their business. And it's not just you wake up one day and everybody knows about your company. Even like I've heard people talking at the beginning of the pandemic about this new company, Zoom, even though they've been a big business and company, like public company now for a while. But
Zoom, what's that?
yeah, it was like this new company, Zoom, right? But yeah, I wanted to jump over to Nairobi's question here about how it's been on the commercialization journey of Airblocks, and sometimes startups struggle to sell their ideas or pitch to investors. And what was the strategy and pathway for you guys?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, Nairobi, that's a super great question, because I think a lot of people don't talk about this because it's kind of a sore spot for a lot of startups. And I think something that really helped us was having kind of a indisputable third-party validator validating what we're doing is important. And of course, what I mean by that initially was with the NASA iTech program. That's been huge for us to have of course, like one of the largest like agencies in the US government, of course, helping to fuel and innovate, our company along with other companies in the cohort. That was the biggest help to us, because it's kind of at a certain point, like when you build an idea and you're like, okay, I'm Joe or Sally or Susan, and I have this startup that I've created, and I've gone through, with my lawyer, or whatever, I've done all the paperwork, I have the C Corp or S Corp or LLC or what have you. It's kind of like, okay, you have X. Now you try to sell X to this industry, and you're going to constantly be trying to like refine and refocus the scope of who you're trying to target. But I think a lot of companies, and like no one talks about this, which is kind of disappointing. But like I had a great conversation with one of my friends, and they said like, and they kind of gave me some tough love, but it was what I needed to hear. They said like, when you go on Amazon, or Shopify or Etsy or any sort of online marketplace, and you're going to go and buy something, are you going to buy something that has no reviews, no stars, no attention, or something that has 100, 1,000 reviews, 5-star ratings, people are commenting saying, I love this, this is so awesome? you need that. And my friend was telling me that like until you get that, it's going to be really hard to sell and really hard to commercialize until you get that brand loyalty and you have raving customers raving about what you're doing all the time. That's like the like the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like the peak of self-actualization, right? That's what we all want to trend towards. But getting into the NASA iTech program was so helpful for us because I'm just gonna be honest, there were a lot of people who did not understand what we were doing, and like maybe even like still might not necessarily understand it, which isn't like a knowledge deficit thing. It's just if you haven't worked in a kitchen or you haven't worked in a post office, you don't know how demanding or like time consuming or tedious or hard work that type of environment can be. So you can't blame people for not necessarily understanding it, but having a third party validator to basically say like what you're working on is important, this is necessary, and like kind of putting you a little bit kind of in a promotion or a feature, that has been so helpful to us. And I'd say in terms of commercialization, you need that recommendation or the series of recommendations. You need to have those testimonials. You need to have the validation, just to be able to promote that. Another thing that's been really helpful, we were just featured on This Week in Startups with Jason Calacanis. We were in Founder University and we got to pitch, or got selected to pitch to Jason, and then Charles Hudson from Precursor Ventures. And it was really, really helpful because now here's our pitch. And then here's two very, very, very big angel investors, venture capitalists that are saying some really great stuff about what we're working on, and especially with the pitch. And I think that's really helpful in a sense, commercialization, but to investors, because now it's kind of like you have a pitch where people get it. And I think I do get feedback sometimes of like, oh, Brian, like if you're more closing this deal, was it the pitch? And then you can kind of have these testimonials to be like, no, I don't think it was the pitch. I just don't think they get it. And there's going to be people that don't get it, but you want to find the people that can understand it. And that's really where, in terms of commercialization, you just need to find those raving fans, those raving testimonials, those people that can kind of stand behind you. Like when you apply to a job and then you have like typically it's like 2 or 3 or 4 references, right? Raving fans that will validate what you're talking about. So of course you might sound really convincing, compelling in the sales room or the interview, but then if you have people that they can call or they can talk to say like, oh my gosh, Sally, Susan, and Joe are amazing. They're the best. You got to go with them. That is so, so, so helpful for actually commercializing. But like you need to have that initial buy-in, and whether that's 1,000 fans saying things or just one really important strategic testimonial saying amazing things, that can really set you up for success. But you kind of have to get in the door, kind of whatever it takes, however you can get that. But yeah, I did not honestly expect to have at least those 2 specific reference points kind of at least this early in our journey at Airblock. So to have this right now kind of says, okay, like Airblock is signaling that this is something that's very important. They have the market validation, investors understand it, industry people get it. That's kind of like what they're building is special and important, and like we should support and help them. Versus, I'm Sally, Susan, and Joe, and I have this idea. It's very different.
Right. No, it's exciting. Yeah, everything or all the traction you just mentioned. And so when you go into the fundraising and investor outreach side, do you say, all right, we're dedicating the next 3 months to fundraising, or is it just, we're constantly meeting with investors along the way while we're building out the rest of our company?
The latter for sure. I think that there's kind of 2 camps, or there's technically 3 camps. The third is a hybrid, but like there's the people that are like, I'm just going to invest all my time in investing. That's camp 1. Camp 2 is like, I'm just going to work on product and then we'll worry about sales later. And then I think that there's kind of like this hybrid approach where you constantly have to be meeting with customers. You have to constantly be meeting with investors. You have to constantly be working on building product. They might not be like, is it Prodromo? I think it's like, or Pomodoro. I think that's like the phrase of like the 25-minute or 30-minute intervals. You don't have to do it like that. Like there might be some weeks where you just dedicate to like sales or investor outreach or whatever, but or product development. But you have to sort of be meeting with people constantly because I've met like some very, very, very big investors like over the course of things, and like Airblock maybe is too early for them, and that's totally fine. But it's better to meet with someone when they can't necessarily help you, or you can't help them, or you can't align, before you actually need it in the future. So it's kind of like you set up those connections and those networks, so people like have you on the radar. And every investor meeting that we always have, I always want to end it with like, even if they're not going to invest or they're not going to buy or whatever, I was going to be like, could we add you to our mailing list? Could we keep you updated what we're doing? Can we stay connected? Because there's so much that can happen. Like even like, and just kind of being a little bit transparent, there were people that we reached out to like way before we got into the NASA iTech program. And I kind of use that as a milestone. So sorry if I'm like referring to it a lot. It's just, I kind of see that as like, what is it, the Mach 1 of Aeroblock, where like things really started to take off. It's kind of like that as a benchmark was very important and helpful for us. But it was like, kind of before that, I was meeting with investors, and our team was as well, like meeting with investors, and they go, oh, okay, well, kind of come back when you have traction, and come back when you have milestones. And that just basically means like when you close a lot of deals and have a lot of money, like talk to us at a certain point. I mean, they might want to see other things, but like at a certain point, I feel like that's kind of what that means. And after that, we had a lot of people that actually reached back out to us wanting to talk and wanting to set up a meeting kind of. And it's like, oh, funny, like the timing is around all of this stuff. So it's, you sort of do need to like be having these meetings and be building traction and generating stuff, because if you just do like investor, are you building a product? Do you have validation that what you're working on is important or is necessary, or that people would buy this? So I think you always have to be having a hybrid of, investor, but also product, and like be sales, and like always be working on this kind of all the time. Because again, like if you meet with an investor that, might not be interested now, but you do something in a month, they've already met with you, they've already built rapport, they've already done some sort of due diligence on you. There's probably some notes about you in their folder, or, whatever, Google Doc or however they keep notes of these types of companies. So it's going to be an easier sell once they already know about you. Because again, if you surpass their expectations in a short amount of time, they're going to be interested. If you close some deals and they kind of didn't think you'd do it, that's going to be validation. So you want to set up the conversations ahead of when you'll actually need them. But yeah, we've been meeting with a lot of investors, a lot of customers, a lot of companies, a lot of industry professionals, people to kind of fuel what we're working on and validate it. So we kind of need to be constantly having those meetings set up. Otherwise, you could kind of be building in a room by yourself, or not be connected to anyone. And then when you really need funding down the road, no one really knows what you're doing or what you're working on. And then it's harder to build that rapport over time. But if someone sees, the monthly updates on social media, we get a lot of feedback about that, of like, oh, I see you on social media and I see what you're posting. That type of stuff's really valuable and helpful.
That actually ties really well into the next question I was going to ask. As we're wrapping up here, and everybody that's listening to our video afterwards as well, like, yeah, you had mentioned having a good presence on social media, and where would the best places to follow along with the Airblock story be?
Yeah, so I'd say all of our handles are Aeroblock Tech. So it's just Aeroblock, TECK. And that's pretty much our handle on everything. So I definitely say follow there. Also, follow me, follow Janet, follow our team. We post frequently about this, and we're very invested in it. But also aeroblocktech.com is our website. We post a lot of updates from there as well. And but yeah, I'd say like LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. We try to be everywhere. So we want to find like as many people that are passionate about this as possible, and digitize paperwork. Future work. That's kind of where like LinkedIn, I think, is a great environment for talking about those types of conversations.
Oh, that sounds great. Yeah, I appreciate I appreciate the discussion here. Excited to continue to follow along and share the story here as well.
Thanks for joining us, Brian.
Yeah. Thanks, Jason. Thanks.
Yeah, we'll be we'll be posting this in our community, and excited to have more conversations with you. Keep this going.